here's what you need to set up and paint this little bluebird on a small canvas. This one is painted on that sour cream tub lid. You could paint on coasters or whatever you have that you have decided to paint on. All you'll need to do to prep is a coat of white paint. And some ideas: a seashell, the lid of a gift box, or a regular canvas is just fine. So you will need your painting surface that you're going to paint on, and you will need a vessel for water, a pencil. I use a light blue pencil when I sketch, a medium flat brush. This is just to get your background color laid out. A small flat brush, and this is really useful. This is what I used for making those checkers around the border, and you can see that the measurement of the brush is actually the space between the checkers. An angled flat brush, a round brush, another angled brush. You won't need all three of those. I think I got a little carried away because those are pretty similar. And then a small liner brush. I did have an extra bottle of white paint, which I always keep on hand. I think white paint is an acrylic artist's best friend. These are the paint colors that I used in the painting: Mars Black, Payne's Gray, Blue Lake, Phthalo Blue, Burnt Umber, Burnt Sienna, Yellow Ochre, Brilliant Red, Orange, Medium Yellow, Lemon Yellow, and Green. You can get those on hand. I did pull out of my paint box this fancy pretty magenta color. I wasn't really happy with the checker color. It was looking a lot like the background color that I did, so I added a little of this fancy magenta. You don't have to do that. The phthalo blue and red will be just fine, but if you have something around that you wanted to do in there, that's what I did. And I have these bird images. I will make sure to have a downloadable, printable format for you. And this will become our reference sheet, and this is just something that I do for my paintings. Is I keep a little record, so you can see that from the palette I have all the colors that I mixed up and used in the background, so that if I do decide to come back and do the cardinal and the mockingbird maybe on more plastic lids and make a series of them, I can get that background to look really uniform and make a set. And something to mix your paint on. So this is palette paper. It comes on these tearaway, but you can use a paper plate. Okay, let's get started. So we're going to practice, and we're going to sketch onto the paper to understand and learn how to build this little bird. And we're going to use some very simple shapes. So I'm using a light blue pencil, and I'm going to make a circle for his head and a rectangle for his body. Those are shapes that I see if I were to build this out of blocks. And then a triangle for that tail and a small triangle for his bill. And that is how he's made up. Of course, he's not a robot, he's a bird. And so we're going to now connect those simple shapes with little feathery pencil line, and eventually it will be paint lines. So we're just connecting those shapes and making the bird his form. And the bird is soft or feathery, so I use short little pencil lines, and I will do the same when I get to paint with my brush. So I am just filling out and connecting those, the rectangle, the circle, and the triangle, so that I can see my little bird start to form. And again, I always practice sketching. I don't sketch on the actual canvas. I sketch on a little piece of paper to the side next to my reference photo. And you know, birds, their legs jut forward, they don't go backwards. Now, this background color is, I see a lot of different colors in there. It's kind of a pink, and there's some green and purple. We're going to start with that soft, the out of focus background, and we're going to mix up some color that we can then put onto our canvas. Okay, let's get those paints out. You're going to need that brilliant red, yellow ochre, burnt umber, phthalo blue, light green, and lemon yellow. And we're going to put some white paint out. We're building our background color. We're going to start with phthalo blue, just a small amount of paint, and the brilliant red. So you're just going to pick up a little tiny bit of white, kind of started over here, and you're going to pick up a little blue. Let's pick up a little more blue. And we're mixing. And you don't want to push too hard because we don't want the paint to load up in the shaft of the brush, so really try and just use the bristles. And what we're trying to do is just make different variations of this color, our background color, so that it appears deeper and lighter in some areas. And I swirl my brush to lay off some of the paint because although I'm making a little puddle here to use, I don't want my brush loaded up with too much paint. And I'm pretty happy with those gray, purpley blues, so I'm going to now introduce the yellow. So that's yellow ochre and a tiny bit of green. I hardly ever use green paint out of the tube. Mostly black and yellow, and this is the lemon yellow. So I'm just going to warm up the colors that I already have. So I'm going to drag from the existing little puddles that I have and adding in these yellow and natural colors over here. So we're just making little variations. Again, they're close, but looking in the photograph, the bird has what I'm assuming to be a grassy field that he's gazing at, looking at where he's going to go find his next meal. And we are using all these colors together. Each one of these puddles has just about every paint color that we pulled out. And as I come down closer to the bottom of the palette paper, I'm getting a little bit lighter. And now I'm going to test that last color I did on my reference photo, and I think I'm ready to go. Maybe a little tiny bit more pink in a mess. So this was the color I was most excited about, and I'm going to pick up as much as I can of that, and I'm just going to start laying it right on. Now, I know the bird will eventually be on here, but I am actually just going to coat the whole canvas, and I'm using a little bit of all these colors. And we're gonna just swirl them and lay them on. I'm gonna keep, there's a little ridge, I don't know if you can see the detail, but my paintbrush hugs into it, and that's what gives that nice clean line, almost like it's a built-in frame. And I'm going to keep that so that I might do a checkered border on here. I might glue some yarn or glitter. I don't know. We could make something fun over here in the background. Now, another trick, if you are working on a canvas, you can use masking tape. You can have a border on your canvas itself and not have to. Now, I'm gonna try and get that off because I got a little messy. Okay, so picking up the colors that that I said were my favorite ones, and you can see they just kind of swirl in here. So we will just paint along. you save your paints, you will need that lake blue and white and the small round brush. We're gonna sketch our bird. Pick up a little of the blue here, mixed with that white. And this color is perfect for this bluebird because if you can see in the reference photo, that color is there anyway. So, and if you look carefully, the highlight where the light is hitting the bird on the far side is that light blue also. So just like we practiced sketching, we're going to sketch with paint right onto the little round canvas. So the difference is on my reference photo, I didn't have the round circle. I'm going to take my blue paint on my round brush and I'm going to again practice with paint, and I'm just going to draw the top and the bottom. And that gives me an idea of where I want, how far I want his little head up to the top. That gives me kind of spatial awareness so that I don't start sketching and then realize, oh no, I've run out of space and I don't have room for his tail. So he's gonna be about the same size as my practice runs. So I'm gonna start with that round head and I'm going to just get in there and do that. So here's his round head's gonna go here, and the rectangle body. And again, it's just a first sketch. And then his triangle with the tail feathers coming down. And then he's got this little tiny triangle bill. There it is. That was it. Now it's time to feather those feathers, so pick up a little tiny bit more paint. Again, I don't want a lot of paint, and if you can see that, it's not even coating. If I had loaded up with too much paint, I wouldn't be able to control the amount on there. So now I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna start to connect those simple shapes that we talked about. And no rough lines because he's a little bird. And if you look carefully at the bottom of his tail, it's almost like a little mermaid fin. Do you notice that back down there? And then it's gonna come up and he's got his kind of like a little suit jacket. And this comes in. And he's got that nice soft feathered belly, and his little support where his leg is going to come out. And there we have the shape of our little bird. So the next step that we're going to do is to start introduce the color. So make sure you're happy with, you know, the size of his head and his back and where everything is, and I'm pretty happy with that. And now we're going to start painting our bird. Now we haven't talked about, in the reference photo, he's sitting on a branch. I think I'm gonna have this little guy sitting on something different. Like we had talked about this seam he has down where his kind of feathers meet in here, and that is the darkest. So we're gonna get some more colors out, and we're going to get Payne's Gray, which Payne's Gray really is dark, dark, dark blue. It's called Payne's Gray, but and you can definitely make some grays out of it, but it's kind of a dark blue. So we're gonna do Payne's Gray, and we're gonna get that burnt umber out, and the burnt umber is just gonna warm our darkest color up a bit. So these are pretty dark paint colors. And we're going to need some burnt sienna, which is a really dark orange, and we'll use that in his soft orange belly area. And then we'll go ahead and get orange out. And we're going to get some medium yellow. We had used the lemon yellow before. This is just a little bit, the lemon yellow is towards the green, and the medium yellow is towards the warmer oranges. And we still have a bunch of white over there. So I'm going to use that same round brush because I'm just introducing color. And we're just kind of mapping out where we want those colors. I like this trick of twirling my brush and pulling like that because I get that kind of almost pencil-like tip again. All right, so I'm gonna do the darkest colors first. So I'm gonna take a little of that Payne's Gray and I'm gonna mix it into that blue mixture down here so that nothing is too far away from our original. And so that we get kind of a gray, and I'm gonna warm it up with just a little bit of that burnt umber. Okay. And we can darken this up later, because actually right now this is looking a little more gray in there. It's looking a little bit like our background color. Okay, so this Payne's Gray and the burnt umber and from our sketching color, we're gonna hug into the darkest points. So remember we talked about that seam here? So our little bird, his tail, his feathers kind of come to a meeting point back here, and they have a little ruffling going on with some detail that we can highlight later, but we're gonna put the darkest color in first. And you want to go everywhere that you see the dark color. So he's got a little tiny bit of it up here on his chest. And again, I am not using a lot of paint. It's just a very, very small amount. And his eye, and we'll come back and crispen that up. Is that a word? Crispen? Tidy that up with some true black when we're done. And then if you look at the bill, it's gray. I know, I always want to put those pretty yellow bills, and you can, but for this one, since we're trying photorealism, we're trying to paint the way the photograph shows him, and then we'll later add our own little spin. So we're going to put the gray on there, and kind of comes back in here. Tiny, tiny bits amount of paint. It's a pretty good control exercise and not using a lot of paint because this particular one is pretty small. And then the curve of his neck area, there's a little dark in there. Okay, now to this dark color, now we're going to introduce back into it this blue. And you'll see that the Payne's Gray is going to dominate the blue. That's okay. We'll keep making it richer. And we're going to bring, this is when that phthalo blue is going to come back in. And I think I'm pretty happy with that. Let's check out our reference photo and see how far from the, I want it to kind of disappear, and it's just about disappearing, so I'm happy with that. So that will be our bluebird's color, main color. So we're going to feather around and just coating. Now, we'll be painting where the paint is still wet, and we're going to bring white into it while it's still wet. But we're just adding in the colors that we see, and we're starting with the darkest colors first. So these blues and grays are the darkest colors that we're using, that the bird has so far. And we'll just adding it in. We're kind of like following a map that we made for ourselves. Filling in. And again, really, and you can see the shaft and the bristles. My paint isn't touching the shaft of the paintbrush yet. I'm sure it will at some point, but I really don't like to get this far into something and then have a paint accident from sloppy paint. So just be mindful of that and don't overload. And then these come down here. And I'm surprised it's so quiet. Usually when I sit in here, all I can hear are the birds outside. And I chose these three birds, the mockingbird, the cardinal, and the bluebird, because, well, they are plentiful out here where I am. And I see at least one of them every single time I go out. Okay, so now we've got the true blue in there. And I'm gonna pick up some of that lake blue, the lighter one. White and make a lighter blue, and we can brush that again over his back. And don't worry, we're going to soften it. So that's where the light is hitting, and then there's light hitting down here. Into that our blue bird color, and we're just going to start blending. And you want short little strokes, because if you think about what we're painting here, he's a bird. He's covered in feathers, so there won't be any straight lines. So if you take these short little feather-like strokes, then you can see where the white starts lightening things up. But that's what gives him kind of that molten, feathered look. Just all these short little feathery brush strokes. And just alternating between the dark and the light paint. So you don't have any true lines of where the colors meet. And let's do that above his head. There's a little lightness under his eye area where that orange is going to come. And we're going to rinse our brush off and mix up this orange russet color for his underbelly. So we're going to dip into the burnt sienna and start ourselves a new color set. So the burnt sienna and the orange and a little bit of white. So I'm going to make two different shades of this rusty color for his belly. And we'll save the yellow for highlighting and giving depth. So I'm going to match my color up to my reference photo, and it needs to be a little bit darker, deeper. And all the while I'm making note of what the photo looks like, and then bringing it down and making that happen on my canvas. So I think this is just the right color. Okay, I'm going to rinse this brush off, but not really well. I'm going to keep it as a kind of a dirty peach on that brush and pick up some white. And here's a little trick. We're going to start at the white feather part of our bird, but we are not going to use pure white. We are going to make a really, really light peach and a very, very light yellow and a very, very light blue and put that where the white is, and that will help us create depth. And then at the end, I think of this as an artist magic trick, is to bring in the pure white, and it really makes things pop. So we're gonna put in his very light feathers, and remember they are feathers, so tiny, tiny little brush strokes, and we're using a soft peach. And don't forget to keep a sample of the different shades you mix up on your reference if you ever wanna make a match. Maybe you wanna make a bluebird looking towards this bluebird. Okay, so we still have a not pure white on our brush. It's a softer peachy white for his feathers, and we're going to accent around his eye and just make a little ring of light coming up under his eye. And there's a little light reflection on the under part on his little bill there. And we're going to pick up a little tiny bit of blue with that white. So we've changed our peach white into blue white, and we're going to highlight across where the light is hitting the back of him and the top of his head. And I'm going to rinse my brush and keep it fairly dry. It's just going to be a dampened brush with no paint on there, and soften this line so that the very, very light blue that we put on there starts blending in down to the darker blue. And we just don't want harsh lines where one color starts and the next color begins. So I'll keep dipping, and I'm going to dip back into the original blue and lighten it up just a little bit, and then make kind of a blending between, so you can see that it just starts to show the roundness of his head and where the light is hitting from the back. And I am going to pick up a little yellow now and dip back into that russet of his belly. So we're going to highlight his belly now, just like we did on his back with the two different shades of blue. This is the lighter version of his little russet underbelly, and around his neck, his little collar. And we want to bring in some yellow ochre and that medium yellow and mix up a pencil color. And then I already have that burnt umber over here, so I'm going to lay off some of this paint, get my brush dry again. This is that burnt umber. This was burnt sienna that we used for his underbelly, but the burnt umber we used when we were making up the blues. And this is a really dark color. And I'm going to take some of that yellow and mix it in with this. So I am going to sketch the pencil, and it's hardly any paint. And I have switched over to a flat. So this is the flat brush we used originally. Same kind of idea, I just didn't want it wet. So it's got kind of a wedge to it. So I am going to just, as if it was the log in that picture, I'm going to just put the line here that our little bluebird will be standing on. And I'm going to get a little darker in here. And I'm going to make sure there's not too much paint. And I'm going to give it the little triangle shape at the end of a pencil. And it doesn't have to be that small because the bird's pretty small. We want to keep him looking small. Okay, so that's going to be my pencil shape. And I'm going to just start filling it in with mostly the yellow ochre and a little of that medium yellow and the burnt umber mixed in. So we'll just get a nice shape of a pencil here. And then we'll talk about the top of the pencil being lighter and the bottom of the pencil being darker to help us create a round image. So it'll look like the pencil is actually a curved real pencil and not just a yellow line. That's the goal. We don't want too much paint. Okay, so we have the idea of where we want the pencil. And I'm going to bring in a little white and go back to those orange colors that I had going, and they're starting to dry. That's okay. We just need to scoop up a little bit of it and bring in some of the yellow ochre and the white, a little more white. And we're trying to get the tip of the pencil look, you know, that it's almost kind of a peach. We'll add a little tiny bit of orange in there and a little more white. Okay, we'll brush that into the pencil tip. And this is just the first layer of color on there. We're going to bring some more in. Okay, so we have implied that he is sitting on this pencil. So, and then, you know, remember his legs go forward and his little toes will kind of wrap the pencil a little bit. So I'm going to move back up to my reference paper up here, and a pencil, you know, we made the two lines, the top and the bottom, and the point here at the end. But a pencil is circular. It's like a tube. So we're going to highlight the top light and the bottom dark, and then we'll get a reflection down the middle to make it look like it's three-dimensional. So we'll go back to that same paintbrush that I never even took the price tag off. Okay, so I'm going to pick up more of the bright lemony yellow or medium yellow and mix that up over here. And just a little bit of the ochre mixed into that. And we're just going to take this and kind of drag it down from the top of the pencil. And then we're going to mix that darker one up with more of that burnt umber. And that's more the darker color. Color and white. And we're going to make a light strip. Right there. And this is where that wet brush technique that we shadowed the top of his head with. So I don't have any paint, it's just a damp brush, and I'm just going to smooth. So it's not such a line. And I think I'm going to do that one more time with an even lighter yellow down here. So from the top, dragging the light yellow from the top of the pencil down. A little light source in there. Give it a little more color. And then wash that brush and try that wet brush technique. Now, water will erase the paint. I mean, it really will. You can, I mean, at this point, you could wash that pencil away with water. We don't want to wash it away. We just want to soften the line. There we go. Just softening. And I have added some pure black down here. This is that Payne's Gray. They look probably hard to tell the difference at this point, but remember that Payne's Gray is actually a very, very dark blue, and the Mars Black is a soft or warmer black. And I'm going to go back to that round brush. Actually, I am going to use a tiny little detail brush. So this brush is, and again, there's my trick, you turn the brush while you pull it through. So this is a liner brush. I mean, it is like a hair, right? So I'm going to take the liner brush, and I'm going to take the Payne's Gray, which is the darkest color that I've used thus far, and I'm going to come in and kind of detail his eye and make it a little bit fuller and rounder. And I'm not losing that ring that we made. I'm just intensifying the dark part. And then I'm going to take a little bit of that dark and go right along that line of the reflection on his bill. Pulling it out. And then now I'm going to add those legs. So I'm going to take pure black and mix it up with a little of the Payne's Gray. So it's not so intense. And I'm going to add a little of that burnt umber. Burnt umber just keeps it warm, colored. And remember, his legs kind of come forward. So I mean, they're just a tiny little leg like that. And then his little foot kind of grips the top, and it's bridging over to the other side. And then this little toe is gripping the pencil this way. So that's coming down. We can see that one. And then there's another part of his toe that kind of branches over here. And then we'll do his back leg. You almost can't see any of it because it really is covered by his tail. But there it is. There's the impression of where it is. And while I have this dark color and the liner brush out here, I'm going to give a little tiny detail in here. And if you look at the reference photo, it's got like almost little curvy, I don't know, ruffles. They're feathers. So we will add those ruffles and the detail back in here with our very, very dark hint of black added in. And then with that Payne's Gray and the burnt umber and the black, all of them together, I am going to give the point on the pencil. And so just there we go. So I have only one more thing I would like to do on this before we get to the edge, and that is give a little light reflection of white on the tip of that pencil, and also the magic dot in his eye. So that is this is where the pure white will come in. So with that pure white in your liner brush, you can just give him that little tiny little dot, which is like the spark in his eye. And he's got a few little details of pure white back here in his feather. We haven't really used pure white in his feathers yet. We were using kind of a peach and a light blue. And so this is when we bring in the liner brush and get some more detail in there. And he's got a little tiny bit of pure white right here on his chest. These are like little true feathers. They don't. And I am going to clean my brush, take the white, and I want to roll it over here to make sure I don't have hardly any paint at all. And I am going to go down the front of his little leg and then over on where the light is hitting. And then we'll do the same thing right here. We'll just a little light there and a little spark. Okay, well, I have mixed up the yellow ochre and white. That's all those two. This color came from the yellow ochre and pure white. And I'm going to give a coat to my border.
From above, everyday would seem turning into love song. Press me to your our world where roses grow. When you speak,
I hope you're happy with your painting. I had a blast painting with you, and I'm looking forward to painting again. So I'm off to create the next project, and I'll meet you back here in the studio. Bye!